Welcome to Quick Theological Thoughts, Episode 7. I'm Howard Fisher, and today I want to try to start a series, and we'll break them up into different episodes in order to keep it quick theological thoughts. Today I want to talk about Anarcho-capitalism. The reason why I want to talk about it is because we live in a day where people are really questioning what is the role of government, and Anarcho-capitalism basically says the state shouldn't exist. The state is the purveyor of most evil in the world, right? The number one killer of people has always been the state. Soviet Union killed out who knows how many. Hitler obviously killed who knows how many, and that's not just the 20th century. That's centuries and centuries. Especially when you look at wars, the number of people die in wars. You tally all that up. When we live in a day where the United States government has come to look like Leviathan and has become completely irrational and is grounded purely in secularism, should there be a state, and that can come up. And the person that introduced me to it is my brother, Jim Fisher, and he is a really, really sharp guy. Argues for anarcho-capitalism by using natural law. It's not a scriptural idea. It's an idea. It's a political idea that one uses natural law around us, and it really hinges on the idea of the rule of non-aggression, that we shouldn't aggress on other people's person or property, and that includes the state. Taxation is theft. You've heard that, and that kind of thing. And so my brother, who is super good at taking complicated ideas and explaining them in such a way as you really think you know what he's talking about. Now, if you've encountered that kind of person, he has that ability to explain his political theory and does a very, very good job at it. I'll link to his YouTube account that has those videos, and you can watch them there. He does a fantastic job. What I want to do in starting this series is to start a conversation, because I don't want to sit here and say I'm right, you're wrong. I think I'm right. That's why I'm taking the position that I take. But a good conversation can help clarify. A good conversation can help both sides understand each other, or even persuade each other, or even find maybe ground where we were wrong. And cover some of that. So my brother sent me a video of a conversation, and it's a couple year old video. I think it's actually 2014. So it's been around for a while. It's a video where Larken, I want to say it right, Larken Rose, who's an anarcho-capitalist, but not a Christian, has an interview with Dan McCreary. And so in this video, Dan McCreary is a Christian who is bending towards anarcho-capitalism, and so it's helpful you can kind of see the trend that people are starting to see in the conversation, Christians are having anyway, in this conversation. And I think it's helpful to interact with somebody like that who's part way there or most of the way there, with an anarchist who is all the way there. And I'm a conservative Christian. I believe that there are governments. I believe God institutes governments. And so before we get into the videos, I probably need to lay out what it is I think positively as far as the existence of governments and what their roles are. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created man. He created Adam and Eve. And so God is a God of structure. God is a God of covenants. God is a God of rules and law, right? He is the rule of law. If we don't have the rule of law, then we do have chaos, right? And one of the problems that we'll see is when people tend to miss that there are different kinds of governments. And this video doesn't seem to tackle that. This interview doesn't seem to tackle those issues, and how the criticisms that they're laying at the state can be laid at the other forms of governments as well. But they would simply argue, well, free market. If you don't like one church government, go to another church. There are governments, however, so we have to think through these issues, and there are different governments than just the state government. We tend to equate the word government with the state. If somebody has an issue in your neighborhood and they say, we should do this, we all of a sudden becomes the government, and we all of a sudden become the state, and we are not the government, and we are not the state. We live under its authority. So there are different governments. So God makes Adam and Eve. The first government that you have is the government of the individual. You govern yourself, right? If you do not govern yourself, then God has set up other governments as well. Okay, so the very first thing we see in Genesis 4 is the murder of Abel by Cain. Was there a government there? Well, God's the one that comes after Cain. So no. So see, the anarchists might say, see, there's a problem. See, no government, and so there was a way to solve the problem. All right, let's just kind of work our way through. Do we have an individual who governs himself? So is government number one. The second government is the government of the family. God made Adam and Eve. The two shall become one flesh. They are to bear children. And so we have the government of the family. And we see that expressed in the Decalogue and the fifth commandment. You shall honor your father and your mother. And this is the first commandment with promise. If you keep the commandments, then you end up having structure in your family. You end up having structure where we're not having chaos, and things will go well with you. That's the promise. Things will go well. When you do not honor your parents, you decimate the family, and things don't go well. They just don't. You end up, we can look at our culture today and see all kinds of problems, which I'm not going to get into, but you know the problems that are going on around us. And the biggest problem that a Jewish man pointed out to me when I was in high school, the biggest problem we have is the structure of the family has been decimated. In the black community, it's been decimated. In the white community, it's been decimated. The Asian community hasn't been decimated. Look who's doing well. So, so we have family government, and we have church government. Jesus and his disciples have structured the church. They have given principles that we're to live by, rules that we're to govern ourselves with within the church. Okay, and then we also have what we call today state governments, but there's other political theories than to just have nation states. But there are rulers, there are authorities, and I would appeal to Romans 13 on that, 1 Peter chapter 2, among others. Jesus himself says that when he's standing for Pontius Pilate, and Pilate says, "Don't you know I have the authority to release you or crucify you?" And Jesus says, "You would have no authority over me if it weren't given to you from above." God does establish kingdoms. Okay, God does establish those with the power of the sword. And so there's going to be questions in this interview that, or points of discussion that I just want to take maybe 5 minutes out of whack of this video and kind of interact with it as best I can. And in doing so, hope to start a conversation, hope to point out what conservative Christians can or do believe. Hopefully I'm articulating what conservative Christians believe well. There are people who do it better than I do, and there are people who do it poorly. So hopefully I can do that. So I'm going to wrap this particular episode up. This will be part 1 of the series where we're going to look at a video of an interview between Larken Rose, Dan McCreary, the Christian. Larken Rose is not a Christian. And we'll just kind of start and stop as we go through it. And so laying out what I think government is, government's role is government's instituted by God. God institutes the church to govern spiritual matters. It's also a prophetic voice. God institutes the state to bear the power of the sword, to restrain evil, promote that which is good in society. All those things are to be balanced with one another. All those things are to be governed by what God has said. And this is going to be key, because you're going to hear this come up over and over again when it comes to the state. It makes it sound like that the state has this evil, the state exists. It exists purely based upon evil, authoritarianism. It has this power, and biblically speaking, the state can exist and have its existence based upon what God has said, the authority that God has granted to it, and no more. And we shouldn't restrain, take away the authority that God has given to it, right? So we have to recognize that God has created the world, God has created us, God has created the family, God has created the church. He tells us he builds governments and he tears them down. And we'll try to get into that a little bit more. But Romans 13, I think, is, they're going to get into it, and I'm going to get into it with them. So let's end this particular part 1, and we'll come back with part 2. So thanks for listening.